Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. The truth about the Chrisley family assault accusations. Julie was heartbroken over claims she put her hands on stepdaughter Lindsie. Years after Lindsie Chrisley made the shocking allegation Julie Chrisley shoved at her neck, a production insider exclusively has opened up to RadarOnline.com to refute the allegation. On a 2019 episode of Drive Phil, Lindsie had claimed there was an argument and the altercation escalated and, Julie, shoved me at my neck. Julie never assaulted Lindsie or put her hands on her, a source exclusively dished to us. Anyone who knows Julie knows that's not even something she's remotely capable of. The allegations Lindsie is making are coming from someone who claims they asked Julie to adopt them and said in a 2023 podcast they had no regrets about and am glad they made that decision, the insider elaborated. Why would someone you wanted to adopt you put their hands on you? It doesn't make sense. On a recent podcast episode of The Southern Tea, Lindsie discussed the alleged incident again, reiterating there was a physical altercation. But, outside of that, she said, Julie has never done anything to me and has not gone out of her way to emotionally harm me or had reckless behavior. She also claimed there were significant records regarding the alleged incident, as she had reported it to all three media. Lindsie revealed the night the alleged incident happened, production took her to an undisclosed hotel location, and would not tell the other people involved in the incident where she was. Then, she alleges, they flew her back home. The source insisted Lindsie's claims that production put her in a hotel does not back her story. Based on where Lindsie was residing at the time, the insider explained production had previously put her up in hotels when she would fly into Nashville to film. So this wasn't a special reward or them siding with her or anything, the source said in rebuttal to her version of events. And, if Julie did get physical, why was there no police report filed? Why wasn't Julie disciplined by the network? Why was Lindsie then the one who left the show? These are all valid questions that don't seem to align with Julie assaulting her. While people may think Julie's husband, Todd, ultimately had control over what happened in terms of casting of the show, meaning that Julie could have stayed regardless of any alleged incidents if Todd said she was to remain there, the source insisted that wasn't the case. There was still a production company and a major TV network that made final rulings, not Todd, they confirmed. While the Chrisley family has been estranged from Lindsie for quite some time, the insider explained this particular situation Lindsie keeps discussing still tears at Julie's heartstrings. At the end of the day, this situation with Lindsie and the allegation absolutely broke Julie's heart, the source shared. Julie considered Lindsie like her own daughter and raised her, and having this horrid accusation waged against her. It's something Julie's never been able to get over. The truth about the Chrisley family assault accusations. Julie was heartbroken over claims she put her hands on stepdaughter Lindsie. Rumors are a currency in celebrity worlds, exchanged, inflated, spent, and sometimes bankrupted. For the Chrisley family, whose lives have been both a reality TV brand and a battleground of private dramas, the latest allegation that Julie Chrisley put her hands on stepdaughter Lindsie landed like a thunderclap, loud, divisive, and impossible to ignore. What follows is not a court transcript or a police report. It's a creative reconstruction of the collision between public perception and private heartbreak, trying to parse the truth in a story that has already been told in a dozen different voices. The scene most people imagine is cinematic, a heated argument at a family gathering, raised voices, a misstep, a hand that moves too quickly, and the instant afterward where everything changes. Headlines love that image because it's neat, decisive, and sells pixels. Real life is rarely neat. In the fog between accusation and fact, people are forced to live in ambiguity. Julie, in this telling, inhabits that fog, stunned, defensive, and, surprisingly to some, heartbroken. Heartbroken is a small word for a large ache. It's not only the pain of an accusation that questions your character, but the loneliness of feeling misunderstood by those you love. For Julie, who has built an identity in part on being a devoted mother and stepmother, the suggestion that she would lay a hand on Lindsie strikes at the marrow of who she believes she is. Whether the contact was physical, accidental, or entirely mischaracterized, the claim ricochets through every relationship like a seismic aftershock. Family photos seem suspicious. Old conversations get new subtext. Lindsie's words become a prism through which every past interaction is reinterpreted. On the other side is Lindsie, a stepdaughter withheld from the spotlight until she chose to step into it and speak. Her decision to voice hurt or accuse is not without consequence. People rarely claim to have been wronged for attention without cost. Once aired, grievances become permanent artifacts in the public square. In many versions of this story, Lindsie is portrayed as brave, estranged, vindictive, truthful, or conflicted, depending on who's telling it. The messy human truth is usually a braided rope of those things: someone who felt endangered or disrespected, someone whose feelings were ignored, someone tempted to use the one tool available in a media-saturated world: her voice. Legal realities matter here, and in the court of law, the standard is evidence and testimony, not gossip or ratings. But in the court of public opinion, narrative wins. The truth about what physically happened that day may be straightforward: an inadvertent touch, a defensive motion, or a harder shove, or it might be flimsy and contested. Without documentation, independent witnesses, or a judicial ruling, the story rests on testimony and motive. Motive, however, is a tricksy thing to judge. Grief, jealousy, miscommunication, and genuine fear can all look similar from the outside. What complicates matters further is performance. The Chrisley family's brand has always thrived on heightened personalities and staged intimacy. Viewers tune in for dramatic beats, for the warmth and the chaos. When your life is a product, every interpersonal rupture has commercial implications. Is this accusation a private rift that became public because relationships frayed? Or is it a public rupture amplified because someone chose the spotlight to make a claim? Either possibility carries its own kind of heartbreak: the private kind where betrayal really is intimate, and the public kind where a personal wound becomes entertainment. Sympathy is a scarce resource in viral culture. People line up on either side as if at a sports match, cheering their fave and booing the other. Fans of Julie rush to defend her. She's a nurturer, a grandmother, a victim of sensationalism. Supporters of Lindsie say she deserves to be heard and that families can harbor quiet violences that cameras never capture. Both sides can be sincere, and both can be wrong, not because they've misread facts, which are still unclear, but because they've substituted identity for evidence. We love to believe that people who have played certain roles are fixed. The doting mom, the rebellious daughter, once placed, it's hard to see them as anything else. There's also an emotional economy at play. For Julie to be publicly heartbroken is to perform a different grief than anger or denial. Heartbreak is vulnerable, it asks for pity and forgiveness. It also subtly reframes the narrative: not "I didn't do it, but I'm devastated that you think I would." That nuance matters. Denial can sound combative, heartbreak humanizes. Whether that humanization is earned depends on the listener. And what of reconciliation? The optimistic read of this saga is that airing the grievance might lead to healing, truth told, apology offered, boundaries redrawn. But reconciliation requires two willing parties, and when the media drags wounds into the light, it becomes harder to step back into intimacy. Privacy becomes impossible. Trust, once fractured, requires time and repeated gentle actions to mend, the very thing public pain makes scarce. As with many celebrity dramas, the deeper, quieter story often gets lost beneath sound bites. There are likely long stretches of ordinary affection between Julie and Lindsie, banal dinners, and small kindnesses that never make the evening news. There are also probably moments of tension, resentment, and misunderstanding that, unaddressed, grow into something larger. That is the human landscape where accusations, whether true, exaggerated, or misunderstood, take root. For the outside observer, the ethical stance is to withhold a final verdict. Judgment is easy, curiosity and patience are harder. Ask, what evidence exists? Who else saw or heard? Are there patterns of behavior that corroborate either account? Are both parties represented fairly? These are tedious, adult questions, the ones reporters should ask, and the public often forgets to ask in the rush for opinion. At the end of the story, if the goal is truth rather than a headline, compassion has to be part of the equation. Compassion for Julie, who insists she's heartbroken and must now live with a smear that feels existential. Compassion for Lindsie, who says she was harmed and must now live with the consequences of speaking up. Compassion for the family members and friends caught between loyalty and disbelief. Compassion, in other words, for nuance. Reality TV taught millions to expect tidy moral arcs. Protagonist errs, antagonist learns, harmony restored. Real families rarely follow that script. The truth about the Chrisley family assault accusation may be messy, partial, and mediated by memory and motive. Julie's heartbreak, whether sincere or strategic, or both, is a real thing to contend with. Lindsie's claim is real too in its impact. The wiser response is not to choose a side and drown out the other, but to insist on careful inquiry, to avoid turning pain into entertainment, and to remember that behind every headline are people trying, imperfectly, to figure out how to live together. If anything emerges from this episode, let it be a reminder. Accusations must be examined with rigor, feelings should be treated with dignity, and the messy human work of repair deserves time and privacy. Luxuries our instant reaction culture increasingly refuses to grant. Until more facts are established, the truth about that one fraught moment will remain a contested point in a larger, ongoing family story, one that will likely be told in new ways by new narrators, each convinced they hold the final word.